Sponsored by Local Touch Online, a free online magazine that has an exclusive article by Pop Culture Geekery every month. Believe it or not, that was not a spoiler, but there will be spoilers going forward from here. So I wanted to do something a little bit different with this review. I wanted to go over the differences between the comic, which was originally just called Dallas, and Season 2. In Season 2, 5 is the man with the plan. He knows what to do to try to get the family back out of the timeline. Unlike the comics, where he's still reeling from the events of the first story, and is more of a broken man. As you see here, he spends his days betting on racing. In the show, Luther has taken on the moniker King Kong as an underground fighter who's actually working for the infamous Jack Ruby, who will later be tied to the Kennedy assassination. Unlike the comic, where Luther's body is already more pronounced as a gorilla, he has since gained weight because, again, the events of the first story left him this way. Well, that and also the fact that all he does is sit and watch TV all day long now. In the show, Klaus continues to be his crazy eccentric self and actually inadvertently ends up creating a cult. His path in the comics is not so blissful as he encounters a still very much alive Hazel and Cha-Cha. He even meets God at one point. Yes, you heard me right. In the show, Allison is married to a man who is heavily involved in the civil rights movement, and she has spent the last year recovering her voice and her powers. In the comics, Allison was not portrayed as an African American woman, but her storyline of losing her voice for a year and not being able to use her powers is still there, and she does not end up in the past with the others. In the show, Diego is committed to a mental hospital where he meets Lila. Diego, who in the comic goes by the superhero name The Kraken, has been just focusing on stopping crimes, but of course soon he gets caught up in the whole story. In the show, Vanya has amnesia and has found herself on the farm with Sissy and her family, but in the comics, Vanya is still recovering from the events of the first story, so she's actually hardly in it at all. And speaking of not being in it, Ben is not in the Dallas comic at all, so it's actually really nice to get to see him have a full storyline in the show. The Handler, who's played devilishly well by actress Kate Walsh, doesn't even exist in the comic world, so enjoy her in Season 2. In fact, the Commission, which is featured heavily in Season 1 and 2, is actually called Temps Aeternalis in the comics, and they are still a shadow organization that helps preserve the timeline. But in both the show and the comic, they are constantly chasing after number 5. And remember Lila? Well, she's actually exclusive to the show as well as these guys, the Swedes. I assume they were entered because Hazel and Cha-Cha are no longer in the show, so they were a nice addition, and they definitely upped the threat level. So enjoy both them and Lila, because this is the only place you'll get to see them. And like I mentioned earlier, the whole storyline with Vanya and Sissy and her family was added in, but it was a nice addition because it actually gives Vanya more time to develop as a character, and she's actually a really different character in the show than she was in the comic. So I would highly encourage you to go read the comics so you can see the difference between the two versions of Vanya and a lot of these characters. Because that's actually the point of me making this video, is that my original love is comic books, and I love that shows like this are getting the attention they deserve. So I hope I entice you to go check these out, whether they be in print form or digital. It doesn't matter, you gotta check out these stories. And if that still doesn't entice you, then I'm going to try one last thing. Remember in Season 1 when Klaus went back in time and ended up in Vietnam? Well, the Dallas comic is actually where that comes from. And in that version, it's not only him, but it's also his two brothers. And guess what? They end up fighting a giant ancient mummy. So if that doesn't entice you to read, I don't know what will. Thanks for listening, guys, and I hope you'll check out future episodes.